President Trump says he is raising global tariffs from 10 to 15% after the Supreme Court ruled against a broad swath of his trade agenda. The president wrote on social media Saturday that he will, quote, determine and issue the new and legally permissible tariffs over the coming months. U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer defended the president's trade policy on our Face the Nation yesterday.
Congress has delegated enormous tariff-setting authority to the president, depending on the situation. So even though the Supreme Court struck down tariffs under one authority, tariffs under other national security elements remain in place. Tariffs under what we call Section 301 related to unfair trading practice remain in place. And so we, of course, can conduct additional investigations under these tools to impose tariffs, to have continuity in the president's trade policy.
And the president doubled down on his tariffs this morning, writing online that he does not need congressional approval to enact them. He also threatened to impose higher tariffs on countries that want to, quote, play games with the Supreme Court decision. All right, to help us understand all of this, let's bring in CBS News Chief White House Correspondent Nancy Cordes. Nancy, thank you so much for joining us. Can you break down what the White House's strategy is for enforcing these tariffs going forward? And then is that at odds with the Supreme Court decision?
Well, Adriana, good to see you. They say that their tariff policy is not changing, that they are still all in on tariffs despite the Supreme Court decision on Friday. They're just pivoting to another legal justification for their tariffs after the Supreme Court said their original justification was invalid. They're now using this Section 122 of the 1974 Trade Act. It has never been invoked before, so it's basically untested. It does allow the government to impose up to 15% tariffs, but only in certain situations and only for 5 months. And so that is what the administration says the president is going to be relying on with these new 15% tariffs. Does it face a legal challenge? Does the Supreme Court weigh in on this? Those are all open-ended questions right now. But you're right. The president is threatening countries as recently as just within the past hour or two that if they think that the trade deals that they cut with this president are invalid based on what the Supreme Court said, they better think again because he believes that nothing has changed.
So, Nancy, the question, of course, before I ask you about the State of the Union, is this can only be applied for 150 days without some kind of an agreement from Congress. We know that this Congress has, for the most part, walked in lockstep with the president. But there were some members of Congress, Republicans, who were actually supportive of this Supreme Court decision because they recognize that the power to do what the president did, which the Supreme Court said was illegal, rests with them and not the executive branch.
Right. But it is the policy of this White House to sort of move ahead, ask questions later. And it did take the Supreme Court nearly a year after President Trump first announced that he was going to be imposing these tariffs to weigh in. And so the White House believes that this new approach is going to buy it some time at the very least. And then it'll be super interesting, Vlad, to see what the president says about tariffs tomorrow night in his State of the Union address. We already know that he's been railing against the Supreme Court justices, particularly the 3 conservative Supreme Court justices who sided with liberals in this 6-3 decision. He called them disloyal. He said that they were embarrassments to their families. In fact, he even suggested that somehow they had been influenced by foreign operators. Does he say those kinds of things again in the State of the Union address if the Supreme Court justices are all sitting there, as they usually do, in their robes, in the front row, there in the House chamber?
Everyone will be watching that.
Yeah, for
they
sure.
always sit right there, you know, stone-faced.
I think there was I don't know if there was a Truth Social post where the president, talked about whether they're coming or not and said he didn't care. But yes, normally the Supreme Court is sitting there front and center. All right, Nancy, thank you very much. Good to see you.